Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to At Home, the podcast. I tell you what, y'all, it is sunny and 57 in Wakarusa, and if you are from northern Indiana, that's practically for March 71 degrees outside because you're seeing people walking around in shorts, t-shirts. As I look out the window right now, there's some people sitting around a campfire that is not burning. And so I'm not exactly sure what's happening, but they are wearing shorts. That's what's happening in Wakarusa. Sitting around the table, Angie Brenneman, Dustin Eby, Brant Nine, and we're back for another conversation.
Yes.
On this episode of At Home.
Welcome, guys. Welcome, audience. How's everybody doing today?
Sun's out. Feeling good.
That's changing our attitude, right?
Definitely an attitude changer when the sun is out, for sure.
See, and I think when we do these podcasts and we hand over the trivia to Dustin, he not only comes with a good attitude, but he has a lot of purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
So much purpose.
This might be your purpose.
This could be it. And honestly, podcast trivia, if that's it, I'm good. I'm excited.
You're in.
You sent me a message about how part of what we're going to talk about today a little bit is mission. And then you said it could be like something going off of Mission Impossible. So I didn't do that.
Okay, good.
I know.
It got my mind going for just movie trivia. Mission Impossible.
That's what I knew. I wondered if you'd go movie trivia.
Now, it's just 5 questions. They're simple, I think. Maybe not. They were the first 5 that I saw, actually. So,
Did you know the answers to them?
a couple. Yeah,
All right,
a couple.
see what we got.
Brant, you like
Between
movies.
the three of you.
I love movies.
Here we go. Number 1. First question for movie trivia. What was the first feature-length animated movie ever released?
Snow
Animated?
White. Snow White.
Bam. Snow White.
Let's go.
It's coming out this year.
He just came out swinging. I had to give it to
Oh
him.
my, it's
right
coming
away.
out new this
Look at
year.
him.
That's one.
That's one.
Okay, you win.
Well done. I'm excited.
Hands down.
Wow, what a girly thing to know.
No.
Hey,
don't know
we
how
are
I do
built
that.
up in this office here.
Okay,
we are
that's
built
right.
up.
That's
We
right.
build up.
Number 2. Okay. Brant, you probably won't get this one. In what 1976 thriller does Robert De Niro famously say, "You talking to me"?
Ooh, it's good.
Oh.
Come on.
I was just baby.
You got it?
Godfather.
It's not The Godfather.
Goodfellas.
It's not Goodfellas.
We were like like babies.
Well, were you?
You talking to me?
Give you a clue. Car.
Ooh.
Herbie.
No. Taxi driver.
Taxi. Driver.
I'm sorry, I was going for the Dukes of Hazzard.
Nope, not
he
that
in
either.
I'm joking.
Number 3. What is the highest grossing movie of all time when not taking inflation into account?
Oh,
It's literally how
how do you figure
how
that
the
out?
question
this
was
one.
phrased.
Avatar.
It is Avatar.
The next is Titanic, isn't it?
Well
or something?
done.
No, the next is Avatar 2.
I don't know, but it is Avatar.
I think it is actually.
I'm proud of you. Well done.
Or Black Knight.
Dark Knight.
Dark Knight. Yeah. Batman's black too, so
All right, number
Knight.
4. What is the name of the fictional African country in the movie Black Panther?
Wakanda.
Wakanda.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever. Okay, that was number 4.
This is not in my genre that I watch.
Let's get this is the last one. Angie, you guys can't answer. This is for Angie.
Oh no.
What was the first James Bond movie ever made?
James
come on.
Bond.
First one.
James Bond.
No, it wasn't James.
Was it in the title at all?
Was it there?
It might be actually.
Oh, I don't know. Besides, isn't it James Bond 1, 2, 3, 4?
No.
Like
It's
It's not,
no
it's
James
not like
Bond.
Rocky. It's a little different.
Do you know Brent?
It's not GoldenEye.
Based on a doctor.
It's I don't know. That didn't help me.
Doctor No.
No.
Yep. Not
Hey, I got 2.
Hey,
You know what?
got
You know
two.
what that says though? That tells a lot about our team. We work pretty hard.
Yeah.
We're not just out watching movies
That's right.
and
Well,
we put in the work. What I mean,
Snow White.
Hey,
We're watching that apparently.
Yeah.
guys, I think I saw it on YouTube.
We're on mission here.
There
Right.
you go. That's a good
Right.
segue, Angie.
That's my trivia. So there you go.
I know that was going to be my segue.
Yep.
So yes, we are going to talk about mission because Chris, we are actually in the second week, right, of our re-engage.
yeah.
Because I love how it's a re-engage because we did this last year.
Correct.
So we are kind of going through the 7 weeks of a series that kind of orients us back to why we are doing our building project, why we are on mission here at a church, what we're calling people to do in their everyday life.
Right.
So,
yeah, a year ago, we set out on a journey to try to talk about having a one in your life, somebody who is not intentionally living for Jesus, knows Jesus. And secondly, to try to help us to get our facilities into shape by raising some funds to accomplish that task. And so, yeah, it's been a year, and it was time to re-engage. It's been an interesting conversation. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last 12 months that are worth celebrating.
yeah, I mean, we're sitting here in without offices, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. If,
That part's not worth celebrating.
I know it's not, but I say that because we're only a few weeks away from the demolition of the last phase.
I'm ready.
And that's because the second phase is almost finished.
Yeah.
So that's pretty exciting. So phase 1 is already accomplished, and we're living in it and working in it. So if you come visit us, we're in the cafe on a daily. And then the children's ministry downstairs is almost done. So
Just weeks now.
yeah. So in this series, last week we had you and Brant kind of dissect a little bit and identify what ones are again, like having a one. And Brant shared his story, which I think was really impactful for a lot of people. And Brant, I want to say thank you for being vulnerable, but also thank you for just a perspective that you brought to the table, that a one isn't necessarily somebody that, how do I say this, that we go find. Like, you actually were in the school system, and there are people who came alongside you. You were in a relationship with people at church, and they came alongside you. And so you just kind of shared, a story about how people came alongside your family and the impact it made on you. And if you could summarize in just, a short, I say short because I know it's hard because it's a long story, but to say what that impact was to you and how this kind of, I guess, comes out in relationships and how you interact with people today.
Yeah. No, I think you kind of defined it well. I was a student. I was a neighbor. I was somebody's kid, a friend, a kid to my parents' friends. And so it was the people that we were in direct relationship with that really took time to invest intentionally with me. And these were imperfect people. And Chris and I talked about that on Sunday morning as well. They weren't people who had it all together, but and they didn't even have, Neil Yoder is one of the best examples I have. This is a guy who wasn't like the coolest person in the world necessarily, especially to a junior high boy, and he wasn't, bringing me all of these treats and like donuts or whatever it is that would gauge my interests. He was just present in my life, and so we talked about how there's people who can give you more than just their money and resources. They give you their time, and that was super valuable in my life. And long story short, as I grew up and I accepted Christ and I was being sanctified, I'm still being sanctified today, but as I was growing in my faith, there came a point where I knew I had to pay it forward, and now it was my turn to invest back in others. And so still living that out.
Yes. Well, thank you for that.
I would encourage people, if you hadn't seen, if you weren't here that Sunday, look back on our YouTube channel, Walker's Missionary Church, and watch that March 2nd Sunday.
It was
It's worth hearing the story.
So then this week we dove into John chapter 20 and a little bit on mission. Do you want to give us a little bit of background and the scripture that you went to for that, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. So John chapter 20 is right there in the Holy Week, and I talked about how awful a week these disciples had been through. It started on a mountaintop with the Palm Sunday Hosanna. Everybody's yelling, everybody's excited, and they're fired up. They're with Jesus. And by the end of the week, with all that happened through the Last Supper and the crucifixion, the trials, all that kind of stuff, you find them cowering in an upper room behind locked doors and wondering what in the world they've gotten themselves into, questioning life, trying to figure out what the future holds.
So for those that are listening, I'm going to go ahead and read this, John chapter 20, verses 19 to 21, and then we're going to kind of hit a little bit of some key words that we brought out on Sunday and dive and kind of dissect it and how it ties to us today, and kind of, I guess you could say, make it real for us and what we talk about here on the podcast. So John 20, verses 19 to 21 says, that evening the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly, I love that word, suddenly, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. And as he spoke, he showed them wounds in his hand and his side, and they were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. Again he said, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. There's a lot of words in there and to unpack some key things. But I want to focus in on those first parts there is because they were afraid. They were behind locked doors because they were afraid.
Yeah, I think if I put myself in their shoes, I would have probably tried to get out of the city as fast as I could. Get out into the country, get away from the threat, the fear of what if these guys find us? Will they do what they did to Jesus? Will they do that to us? So they're freaking out. In my opinion, they're in full-on freak-out mode.
Yeah. Right. So they are in that freeze, fight, or flight response that we have as humans. So I want to throw out these questions to these guys around the table. So how often do we find ourselves paralyzed by fear, even after witnessing God's work in our lives? Because the disciples had witnessed God's work. But how often do we find ourselves paralyzed, and how frequently do we choose that inaction and try to control it by locking the doors, isolating, taking ourselves out of the situation? So talk to me about that. Like, we've been here. I think we've lived in it in different scenarios in our life.
Yeah, I really appreciate the way you kind of broke down the story, Chris, and you went back and you gave us some context about why they would be fearful, and almost justifying in a way why they would be behind locked doors in that moment. And it's so easy, even when we have seen God work in so many ways in our lives, because fear, it's a real thing. It's not just a made up emotion that we put onto ourselves. It's a thing that we all have experienced in our lives in one way, shape, or form. And obviously, there's things that we're afraid of like when we're little kids, and then there's things that we're afraid of as we grow older and we're adults, or we're still afraid of the things that we're afraid of when we were little kids. But we talk about, like, in your own life, sometimes it's fear of making the wrong decision. Sometimes it's fear of what are other people going to think? That's a big one, I think, in the world we live in today with social media. And is this going to be accepted? Or are people going to like this or not? What are they going to think of me? And so there's a lot of fear that people carry. And even though when we've seen God pull through time and time and time again, there's just this, for whatever reason, this fear that is it going to happen the next time? Always thinking about the next thing instead of just maybe being appreciative or grateful for what God has done. So fear is, I think, getting locked into this what if mentality of like, well, what if this doesn't happen, or what if this does happen? And we just kind of it's a constant cycle that we just put ourselves through when God is always been, and that's why I love that he says that I am, and he's the same today, yesterday, and forever. So I think just the hope that we have in that and the trust that we can put him in those times is important. And I know that I don't always do, but it was just such a good reminder.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dustin on all of that. For me, specifically right now, my biggest fear relates to my story, and it has to do with our oldest son, Hutch. And I think I'm paralyzed by this fear a lot, actually, that he's going to remember me in similar ways that I remember my dad, as a temperamental, kind of impulsive parenting style with him. And Francie, my wife, reminds me quite often that my responses to him are out of patience and love and kindness. And I always, try to at least give scripture to the why behind the reasons we do things as parents and those kind of things. But I guess that is a fear that I'm almost at times paralyzed by, and trying to make decisions like, should I just take him and do one-on-one things? Should, we do this more as a family? And then it ends up being where I think about all these things, that we talk about all these things, but we don't always act on them. And I don't always give them up to Jesus and remember how he worked in my life, despite my father, and how much more he's going to work in Hutch's with the partnership I have with God. So, yeah.
I think this one hit home with people because of the conversations, emails, text messages that I've had since Sunday. I challenged people to really ask themselves, what is God calling you to? And the number of conversations I've had since then of people saying, can I talk to you about this? I feel like God has called me into this, but I don't know how to move and take that first step forward, because I think it is fear. So how do I overcome the fear of, just like you guys are saying to a point, the what ifs? Like you were referring to that, Dustin. And I think it's a hard move. Sometimes that first step's the hardest step, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I'm not gonna play to the side of fear. I'm gonna play to the side of isolation, because usually when I'm in a situation where I don't know the outcome, or I'm guessing maybe that there's some risk involved, I'm a lot quicker to isolate and step away from the problem and just not deal with it. And that actually is paralyzing.
So is that a temporary thing, or is it I don't want to deal with it, I'm staying isolated from it typically in your life? Is it something that you just need time to process? Because I think sometimes people feel like if I don't take the step right away, then I'm living in fear. I'm a slower processor. I need to think about some things for a little bit.
I understand
and then,
exactly.
So it's a withdrawal in order to process and then go forward. What is it with you?
Well, I think it's sometimes it's just plain avoidance, because it's harder to go through and actually become because the work to get to the next step is usually on me. It's usually on me. I'm the one that needs to change. I'm the one that needs to get over the fear, or I need to get over the anger because I want to fight through the situation, or I either want to run away from it, but I need to confront it. That's what I'm saying. And so for me, sometimes avoidance is just easier. And kind of like, oh, I'm just going to play over here and you can play there, and let's just call it all good, right? And I don't think that's actually good either. So I think fear can paralyze us and keep us from moving. But I also think isolating and avoiding is about the same thing as locking the door and not going out and, just saying, hey, I'm going to huddle down here and I'm not going to deal with it. And so I just want to say to the listener, you could find yourself in either camp. But whatever it is, you got to get to the next step, just like you said.
Yeah, I thought one of the neat things that you said was this idea of focus. I can't remember which point it was under, but you're just talking about where's our focus? Because if we are just constantly focused on our problems or our fears, then we're not going to get too far. But when we're focused on Jesus and what He has called us to, called us into, it just makes such a difference. And I know for me, personally, it's a lot of an issue of confidence and calling. Those are the two that I wrestle with quite often. Of like, okay, what is it that I'm specifically called to, and how long are you called to a specific thing? Are you called to something or a position or whatever for years, or do you take it day by day? Do you just trust that this is, once you're in a spot, that's where you're supposed to be forever? It's just that wrestling, and then the confidence of being like, okay, I think I could do this, but am I the right person to do it, or whatever? And so it's those questions that you wrestle with all the time. But I thought when you were talking about that idea of focus, that definitely helps. It doesn't keep us in one specific spot.
Right. Because I think that focus is exactly what happens in the room. All of a sudden, their perspectives change, because suddenly Jesus appears. He's right there.
Yep.
Yeah. And after the moment of shock, I think peace does set in. Mm-hmm. And He says to them a couple of times, hey, peace be with you.
He said it to him twice. I don't think Jesus would repeat something unless it was really important. And I think He knows the turmoil in our hearts and the turmoil in our minds and what was going on with the disciples at that point.
I think, going back to what Dustin was just saying too, like I think they remembered a lot of what their calling is. And I've heard numerous speakers talk on this idea of calling. And when you realize, like, oh, my calling is Jesus, right? My role in that calling may look different from time to time, but my calling is to commune with him and to grow closer to him and to be with him. And when he comes back in the room at that moment, they realize, oh, our calling is right here and our role is about to change and the way that we do things is about to change. And so I do think you gain peace when you understand your role in your calling.
Right. And I wrote this down because it really stuck with me as you were talking through this, and that when here they are, they're afraid, they're in the room, and all of a sudden Jesus shows up. And because Jesus showed up, they're able to take the next step to peace. Not because they came to it on their own conclusion or they didn't fill in, like they were trying to fill in and try to make peace by locking the doors, keeping themselves isolated, doing all those things. They were trying to make peace, but it wasn't the peace that passes all understanding that came into it was Jesus that came into the room that changed it.
They were trying to manufacture peace,
Yeah,
right? And I
100%.
think we do that today, don't we? How do we manufacture peace today?
Oh, we fill it in with other things. Like you can fill it in with food and entertainment and all that stuff.
If I'm active, I'm busy, I'm
Fast
doing
cars,
this. Yeah.
you know?
Ooh, come on.
No, but I mean that, like all the things that you do and you add into your life, things. And that's exactly that. It's only by Jesus showing up. So how can we in this step keep ourselves or be aware or put up guardrails in our lives to try to not manufacture peace, to look, like to focus, just like what you said, Dustin, because focus takes, we have to do it. We have to make that change. We have to change our perspective. And so Jesus shows up, he gives them that peace. But how can we on an everyday basis kind of grasp this kind of peace that Jesus is giving them and offering them to walk out in mission?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking through it.
No,
I'm
you're
not,
fine.
I'm not real sure about where my mind's just going in a bunch of different directions. But I think initially, my first thought when you ask the question is just to focus on his words. I mean, his presence. I mean, he's right there, and he's saying, peace be with you. And I just can't. Again, we try to put ourselves in those situations, and we can't. But just to even think about what that would be like for him to be and just suddenly to appear in the room. And to think that everything that you had done for the last 3 years was gone and it meant nothing. And then to all of a sudden be like, oh, wait, we're back on. Here it is. We're everything that had purpose and that had meaning. And this was real. And like, oh, my word, he was right about everything. And such a drastic emotional roller coaster that probably was. And I think in the moment, there's probably nothing else that would matter other than his words, because everything he had said is true at that point. And like not that you wouldn't have believed him before, but now it's like, no, okay. I literally see the scars. I see the holes, and I want to hang on to every word he says. And why would I not want to be in his presence constantly?
Right. And so, so I've been on this journey of just kind of like working through that. I want to live life. I don't want to have my life run my life. Like I don't want life to run me. I want to live my life. That's a big concept, but in that, I think we can get this peace almost becomes abstract. Like we can't really grasp it because we're constantly living life, constantly, like you said, we're on the go, we're feeling it, we're busy, and so peace is almost unattainable in our society and in our culture today. We always have something in our ear. We always have a screen that we're looking or watching or listening to. And so when I hear this word, when Jesus says it to him, peace be with you, I'm like, I want that kind of peace today.
Yeah. Well, it requires us to turn our attention to Jesus and fix our eyes there, like you were talking about earlier. But it also, at the same time, requires us to minimize the what ifs. I think we get too much concerned. Like, let's go back to the story of Jesus. The disciples had to shift from the what ifs. Well, okay, but what if we walk out of this room and they arrest you again? What if we? What if this happens?
Yeah. What if we die?
But what if? And I think at some point it's being able to say, okay, I fix my eyes on Jesus and I'm going to let the what ifs happen. There's going to be, and I got to turn my attention that way. I go back to the story of Peter walking on water, right? When his eyes were fixed on Jesus, he could do it. As soon as he took his eyes off, he sunk. And I think that's this concept. We have peace, even in the storm, when our eyes are fixed on him. But that means this is Chris talking to himself. I have to stop being so consumed with the what ifs.
Don't you think that they went from what if to even if? So this whole idea of like their confidence, Dustin, you were talking about, and then what you mentioned, and I think where we're going is their confidence, but also their hope that they now have that even if we die.
Yeah. Jesus, when he showed them his wounds, is in essence saying to them, look, I overcame the worst that the world could offer. And I'm here, and I'm the one telling you, peace be with you.
Mm-hmm. I just read this morning something that's almost just sitting there at the front of my brain, just letting it to just sink in, is that this death, this resurrection, this encounter with Jesus was planned before creation by God. And that when we think about this moment, when Christ died on the cross and he did this and he's calling his disciples to mission and to a purpose, it was designed before he designed the moon and the stars. And that just sits there. And so when we say, when he suddenly appeared in the room after going through this and he says, peace be with you, that's life. That's transformational change that I don't even think we're not actually called to wrap our minds around it.
Yeah. When I look at the sequence of things, I see fear and I see peace. I would need time to sit in that peace for a while and process. But it doesn't stop there. He turns his attention and he says, okay, now I'm sending you.
It was almost
sending me where? Yeah, to do what? Sending me on vacation because we've been through a lot. Yeah, let's go. No, I'm sending you out on mission. It's from fear to peace to mission.
And think how much more, maybe this is just me, so I got to be careful not to just put my thoughts on them, but almost like more motivated they were after that when he said, okay, now it's your guys' time. They still probably had questions, were wondering, what does that mean? But after he's like, no, now you go. The confidence they probably had in the calling and in their mission was like, okay, no matter what happens, we're going. And to see what has happened today in Christianity because of the boldness and the courage of those guys who went out and, changed everything.
Yeah, they were transformed by Jesus in that room to know that no matter what, if they lost their life, they gave up family, they went on mission. They had a purpose, they had a reason, and they knew it firsthand. They knew what that was, and they were called to it. And I think I wanted to read this definition of mission so that we can kind of dive into this last concept just a little bit. So it says, from our reliable Google Wikipedia, any important task or duty that is assigned, allotted, or self-imposed, and it has an important goal or purpose that is accompanied by strong conviction, a calling, or a vocation. So when we say mission, we're talking about something very specific. And so let's discuss this. When we move to this mindset of on mission, is it important to understand why we're doing this? Like, it's not about me. It's not about what it is my action that has an impact, but it's the mission that Jesus is laying out here, that he's calling to take the gospel to the world. And that's not about me and what my part is. He's just calling me to go alongside him and share the gospel. How do we get that mindset? How do we move to that mindset from fear to peace and to stay on mission? What are some things we can implement into our daily?
Chris, I think you've done a really good job of this since the few years that I've been on staff here. But the challenge to get in the game, this idea that calling and that Christianity is not about isolated comfort, but it's about this it's about a community. It's about a body that is involved and about getting into the game and not just standing on the sidelines or being on the bench or whatever. We all are a part of the body, and to find whatever it is that we feel like God has called us towards. And Brant, I thought you did a good job describing that earlier, of just that if Jesus is the goal and taking the gospel everywhere, whatever it may be, a certain job or a certain skill or ability we have, but finding out what it is and then truly living that out and inviting as many people as we can to be on mission with us, and to make more disciples is the goal. Now, there's obviously different ways that that's done, but to live that out and to go from just being filled with this peace now, because it could have been really easy to be like, wow, thank you for coming back and showing us that gives us comfort. But if they wouldn't have taken that next step, if they wouldn't have gone out, then we may not be sitting here today. And so the fact that they did, I think, like I said earlier, just puts more motivation for us to be able to continue to live out that calling in our own lives.
I just want to highlight that here at Walking MC, we have this program that we run our people through. Leadership has all gone through it. And I guess I just believe that sometimes when you're on mission, you have to know your why. And we call this equip. And equip is the perfect word for it because it helps you define your why. Would you agree with me, Chris?
Definitely. Yeah, why are we here? What's our purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? What's God called me to? And then equipping to be able to accomplish those tasks.
Right.
So we live on purpose, on mission.
Yeah. So as listener, if you are listening, you're like, well, I don't really know my mission. Well, yeah, my mission might be, to raise your kids and keep them alive and get to the next stage. One. Right. But I do think there is this next level mission that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll talk to the adverse of that. And I think the problem that we see happen today, and I alluded to this on Sunday, is the passivity of followers of Jesus. We have almost seen it as our mission now is to follow Jesus, choose to follow Jesus, come to that saving knowledge and a relationship with him, and then come sit in churches until Jesus takes us home. And therefore, we must have done our mission because I showed up 26 times a year, right, on a Sunday. And therefore, I guess I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And that's missing the mark of what God's actually called us to do, to make disciples.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the pastors he called to make disciples. He called us to be disciple makers.
Right. And when we are on mission, we live transformed just as much as the person that we're, walking with or bringing to Jesus. Because when we're on mission, we get transformed in the process too.
Well, I don't want to speak for Brant, but I feel like that was why his story was so powerful, because seeing who he is not only become, but just his story, and now that he's serving in a church, and it was so inspiring because of those people who walked alongside him. And it wasn't just one person for a short season. It was multiple people who had invested in him and his family over years that, made a difference, an eternal difference. And I think that was the most inspiring thing to walk away from.
Yeah, so thank you, Brant, for sharing that and being an example in that even today. So I think that's key. So listener, guess what? This isn't the end of our Re-Engage series. We'll be back in a few weeks and hitting on the next couple topics I think we have coming forward, which we have one on sacrifice, right? Correct? Coming up?
That's right. Coming up Sunday.
So yes, so stick with us. If you want to dig into some of these resources, you can find resources on our website. You can go to At Home and listen to other previous podcasts, but also you can just visit us here at walkingmc.org and come see us on a Sunday morning. So thanks for listening.